going to learn introduction to HTML and CSS. And at the end of this call, we'll learn how to build a simple login screen. Then tomorrow we'll have our introduction to JavaScript also by Mr. Michael. So Mr. Michael, thank you for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wisdom, for giving me this opportunity to be in this platform. Yeah, good evening, everyone. Like Wisdom have already said, my name is Michael, a website developer, full stack. Okay, today I will be taking us on introduction to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So, but I wouldn't want us to waste much time. So it's going to be just more of a basic introduction. And for today, we'll be looking at HTML and CSS. Okay. So first of all, I hope you all have your pens, your biros active, and I'll be sharing my screen so that I'll be showing you what I am doing. First of all, we need to understand certain concepts, concepts of web development. Okay. I will assume that everybody here are beginners and newbies, and we still do not have maybe the basic knowledge of HTML. That's my assumption. So in case you're already a pro in HTML and you see me talking about the basic stuff, please just be patient. There might still be some other things you will still grab, okay? Okay, so let me share my screen right now. Also, my screen right now.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, I'll quickly just jump right into what we have for today, and that's introduction to HTML and CSS. Like I said, today we'll be talking about HTML and CSS. So I believe by now some of us must have known what is HTML, which is actually a markup language for the web. The HTML simply stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and we actually use it to build the skeletal part of the website. Okay, while CSS, which is the cascading style sheet, is just like the paint. It's just a styling language that we use to design the visual appearance of the website. These two are used for front-end development. So let us talk about it. Web development can be divided into three major sections. One is the we call it the front-end development. The second one is the back-end development, and we have the full stack development. Okay. Now for the front-end development, we are going to be looking at the tools that you need as a front-end developer. Now, for the front-end development, you need HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. These are the basic languages that you need to speak very effectively to be a front-end developer. Now, the back-end developers have something that is different from the front-end, like other scripting languages like the Python, PHP, and the rest of them, which is beyond the scope of this section. Then we have the full stack development. The full stack web development is the combination of both front and back end development. So if you are going for a full stack web development, that means you must have knowledge of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and you also have knowledge of database and some other back end scripting languages. That makes you a full stack web developer. Okay. Now, generally, most web developers, there are tools that they usually use. And one of the tools they use is Visual Studio Code. This particular editor, you call it code editor. And this code editor is very, very popular among developers. So this, if you're looking at my screen, this is actually the link, the URL, as the domain for downloading this code editor, all you need is just to click on download. If you have not gotten it yet, just click on download and it gets downloaded and then you install it. Okay, so that is what we need. And then basically you also need a browser. You can use any favorite browser of yours. I have so many browsers installed on my phone, on my laptop. So you can have multiple browsers on your system and use your favorite for your development. So now let us take a look at how the web works. Let's take a look at how the web works. And we're talking about visit a website. A website has what we call the URL. Like for you to visit a website, you are supposed to visit it using a URL, which is Uniform Resource Locator. Now, that locator is actually going to fetch information from a certain domain. Okay, example is google.com. Okay, google.com. So, like when you say www.google.com, this is actually a unique resource. So it is a URL that points us to where we can actually get some information from Google. Just like when I was talking about downloading the Visual Studio Code, you visit this URL, code.visualstudio.com. That's the URL. And it takes us to this particular domain where we can actually download this. So, and now what happens is that when you use your browser, that's what we call a client. Like, accessing the internet is made up of two parts too. We have the client and we have the server. Okay. Now the client is just the application itself. The application like the Chrome browser. You as a user, you're using your Chrome browser or you're using your Mozilla Firefox browser, and you type in a uniform resource locator in the address bar, and it opens up a certain page for you. Now, what happened is that your Chrome browser as a client is making a request to a server hosted somewhere on the cloud remotely. It is not that particular information you're looking for, it's not in your system. It is somewhere out there in another system in the cloud. And simply using your Chrome, which is a browser, a web browser, you are making a request that you need something, like you needed some certain information, and it makes a request to the server, and that request gets handled by the server, and a response is returned. Now, the response is now what you are looking at on your web browser. So when you made a request, you get this response. And this is actually the response. You can interact with it. You can make another request, and the other response is set in. Okay, so this is just like the technicality of how the website itself works. And all these things happen via what we call a protocol. We have the HTTP and we have the HTTPS, which the HTTP is actually the secured protocol, while the HTTP is not secured. Now, because I'm visiting this domain and this is using the HTTP protocol, you see that we have a key here. Whenever you're visiting a site that is secured, you see a key, a padlock by the side here. That simply tells you that you're actually visiting this thing using HTTPS protocol. And what is HTTP? It simply stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Okay, so that is that on this. I don't know if you have any questions. Should I proceed?
Yeah, proceed.
Okay.
You can proceed.
Okay. So now I'm going to not waste too much time talking about this. At the end of this training, you are going to be getting some documents and some resources that you can actually read up. Now, I would just simply recommend certain domains where you can actually go to practice or study. Now, one of them is this Gigs for Gigs. When you go to this Gigs for Gigs, you can actually read a lot of stuffs there. Okay? You can read a lot of articles. When you want to practice certain things, you can come to this CSS battle. I'll still come back to all these ones later on. But for now, let me just move straight into business of the day. And let us take a look at the basics of HTML and CSS. Now, we're talking about HTML. this is just what HTML is all about. And I'm using my code editor, which is Visual Studio Code, like I already said. Now, I'll close this file for now. When you open up your Visual Studio Code for the very first time, this is what you're going to see. You're going to be seeing this interface. Okay? And for you to be efficient, there are certain plugins or extensions that you will need to install on your Visual Studio just to make your work smooth. Now, one of these you are going to be using is what we call the Prettier. So you can come to this place, this particular section here for extension, install Prettier. So Prettier is just going to make it's actually going to make our code pretty. This is it. Okay, I've already installed it. If you have not installed it already, if you go there, you're going to see something like this button, install. So you just click on install and it gets installed. So another plugin that you will need to install in your Visual Studio Code is the live server. Okay, so you can just come and type live server and you see this live server here. You can install it, but I would recommend you install this other one, this one by Ian Nick. This particular live server also has support for PHP. In case after you are done with your front-end development, you want to advance to PHP. You want to advance to PHP, you can actually use this tool to preview your work. Now, what this live server actually does is, while we are coding our HTML or while we are coding our PHP, you can actually make changes to your source code and have the changes automatically refresh for you on your web browser. You don't always have to come and code on your system and then go to the browser to refresh. Okay, that's what we call it live server. Okay, then we'll also be looking at another extension that is nice, which you'll be needing, and we call that HTML auto tag rename. Okay, so take note of all these plugins that I'm mentioning. This is it here. I've already installed it. Now, what this does for you is, by the time you are coding your HTML tags, you try to rename a tag, it can also help you to rename the ending part. For example, you can see here, when you try to rename something like this, it also affects the closing tag. So I don't want to confuse you all, guys, but this is just recommended. Make sure you get them installed on your Visual Studio Code and then follow me along while we code. So now, for you to get started, I will be using a simple HTML project. While I code along, I explain the different things that you need to know about HTML so that it becomes practical. I don't want to just be talking too much. Okay, so I'll close this. Already on my desktop here, I already have a folder. Okay, on this place, I'll create a folder here and I'll call this intro to HTML, intro HTML CSS. Now, normally when you are starting up a web development project, it usually starts like this as a folder. Okay, so you can actually call it this. I already have one I created before now, which I called the HTML CSS intro. Okay, so but I will be using this particular one. So now the next thing we will want to do is to open it in our Visual Studio Code. Let me close this and open this other one. Okay, so I'll open this particular folder inside my Visual Studio Code. So you can see open with code here. And it's opened right here. Okay. Like I said earlier, once you open your Visual Studio Code for the very first time, this is just what you're going to be looking at. Now, on this other part of this side, this left-hand panel is the Explorer, where you can see a list of everything you have inside your project folder. We call this the project folder, which is the root folder where your project is taken off from. We call it the project folder. And right inside here, I can create a file. Now, to show you exactly what I mean, if I open this folder, you're going to see that it's actually empty. There's nothing inside it. I just created it now. And that is why it is also empty right inside there. So I'm going to create a file right inside there. So I'll click here and I'll click on this plus icon here to create a file. And I'll call this index.html. All right. Now, this is already created right now. All right. Now, I've created this folder, this file, index.html, and it is open, but it's empty. So nothing is actually going to happen here. Normally, I could just, because it is having this extension, .html extension, that automatically tells us that we are going to be writing HTML code inside of this file. And every HTML code we have automatically is going to take up the icon of your default browser. In my own case here, it is Opera. If you're using Chrome, you'll be seeing Chrome icon right here. And I can double click on this to view it in my browser, but I wouldn't want to do that. So I'm going to use my file server, which I've already installed. Now, when you have already installed your file server, you're going to see this go live here. So I'll just simply click on go live so that it launches my browser for me and it's serving this particular file. Now, while that is happening, let's start exploring. Now, the server have already started. Now you can see that the server has just started and is actually being served on 127, that's IP 127.0.0.1, and it's empty. There's nothing right inside there. So I'm going to place this side by side with my code editor so that while I'm working, we are seeing what I'm doing together. Okay. All right. Now let us take a look at this. Close this. First of all, for you to get started with HTML, there is a particular structure that you definitely need to understand in HTML. HTML has a structure, and that structure is just, first of all, you have to declare what kind of HTML you are writing, which is this. Okay? And we call this doc type. This doc type HTML actually tells us that this is HTML5 that we are writing. We have different versions of HTML, but the latest we are working with now is HTML5. Okay, like I said, I wouldn't want to be going so much into details. We can actually read up certain things later on. For now, I'm more of the practical aspect of this section. Okay, so this is actually going to define that we are writing HTML5, and then we have the open tag. Now, like I said, why we call this HTML a markup language is because it's actually made up of tags to mark up the skeleton of your web browser. Okay, so now I just typed in something right here, and if you look at it, it's still not showing anything here on my browser because I have not saved it. And even if I do save it, it is still empty. Nothing is going to really happen because here we just have this structure, which is the open tag of the HTML. Now, let me just remove this part so you understand what I'm saying. First of all, you open the HTML and you close it. Now, the difference between the open tag and the closing tag is simply this, the /. Okay, so this tag opened here, and you specify the primary language of your code, which is, in my own case, is English, and this tag closes here. So every damn thing I'm going to write inside here is going to be seen as HTML. Okay, then after the HTML document itself actually is divided into two major sections. These two major sections is just these two things you see here, the head and the body. Okay, so right inside the HTML tag, you're going to have the head, and you're going to also have the body. All right? Good. Now, this header section is just where you're going to introduce a lot of things like the meta data information of your website. Okay, I will be putting in some stuff right here. Now you can see some of the meta tags that we have here. Now, this meta information, this meta tags actually provides further information to the browser, telling it, helping it to understand more how to handle this particular document that we have written. You understand? So this is actually how it is. Now, first of all, we are defining the character set of this document to be UTF-8. And then we have this meta name here, which is the name is viewport. Now, for responsiveness, when you're writing a program, when you're writing a HTML, when you're creating a web page, one thing always comes to your mind, and what comes to your mind actually is the responsiveness on other devices. Hello, are we still together? I hope we are still together. I want to be sure that we are up.
Yes. I'm with you.
All right. So now, right here, we have this meta name to equal to viewport. Take a look at how it is written. Now, there are two types of tags. There's one we call the single tag, and there's one we call the double tag. Now, the single tag is just like this meta tag. This is an example of it. And how do we know single tags? They don't have closing. This just opens like this. There's no closing. It automatically closes itself. But the double tags are the ones that you must close, like this head. You must define where the head starts, and you must define where the head stops. You must define where the body starts, you must define where the body stops. Likewise, the HTML, you must define where it started and where it ended. So these are actually a block of HTML code. They form a block. And this, like this, also, this doesn't really form a block. They're just like a single element tag. They don't usually form a block on their own. And I'll explain that further in this section. So I'm coming back to this meta name, viewport. So this viewport actually is talking about the viewport of your device, okay? And then it's actually looking at the width of your device, because your phone screen is actually different from your laptop screen. Even different PCs has different screen sizes too. So this particular line of code here actually handles that, giving it an initial scale of 1.0. Now, if you are writing a HTML page that is going to be responsive, then you must have to specify this, okay? So that your browser can be able to understand your breakpoints and be able to render your document accordingly, depending on the device you are viewing it from. You understand? Now, we move down to the body. Now, this body section here, okay, sorry, I jumped something, the title. This title actually defines the title of our document. Okay, I'll save this. This actually defines the title of our document. So I can change this. It can be anything. For now, I'll just say Intro to HTML webinar. Okay. So this title actually, like, if you take a look at the top of this place, let me zoom this in. The title actually is what you usually see at the top of this section here. That's where you see the title. You can take a look at this. You also see the title. So this title is actually being defined at that particular section. It's usually being defined at this title section of your header in HTML. While in the body here is where you now write whatever content that is going to appear within this white space. Okay? So if I should type any nonsense inside here now and I save this particular stuff, it's supposed to refresh here. Let me see. Okay, it's you can see that it actually appeared here. Okay? I will have to stop this file server. I think something happened there. It's supposed to be reflecting by itself. All right. Okay, so you can see that within the body section here, that is where you now have the actual output that you're going to be seeing. So whatever thing you define at the top here, within this head section, you will never see it within this place. If at any point in time you mistakenly see what you write inside here, inside this white space, that means there is a problem. Probably you didn't close a certain tag. Okay? So that's by the way. Now I will not be talking about certain other tags that you have to understand in HTML. Now, when you're writing HTML actually is made up of various tags. Okay? It's actually made up of various tags in HTML. Like we have the div element, we have the div, we have the div tag, which is like this, div. Okay, you open it and you close it. Now, the div element has no special meaning at all, but it represents its children. Now, this is actually, we call it division. You can use this thing to divide sections of your web page. All right. We also have another one called section. We have the section tag. Now, this section tag is also introduced inside HTML5. And you can use this actually to it's not as if it actually has any special meaning. You can either decide to use section or use div interchangeable. But if you are writing a code that is readable, a code you want to arrange your code in a way that it is easy for you to even also to understand. That is why this also comes into HTML5. So with section, you can actually have multiple sections within your page. Let's say, for example, I can call this section 1 and I can duplicate it. Now this can be section 1 and this can be section 2. This can be section 3. Okay. Now, let me try to start up my server again. Okay. Now you can see it actually came up here. Section 1, section 2, section 3. Now, if you have something like divs, you can have different divs. You can have like, let's say, div 1 and the rest of them, just like that. And it's also going to come up here. Okay. I wonder what is happening with my live server. Sorry for that. Okay. So you can see it actually came up here, div 1. So this is how you actually bring up outputs on your web browser. Then there are still other things too that we have. We have tags like the nav. When you want to define a nav bar, we have the nav. Okay. We have the header. Okay. We have the footer. We have the article. Now, all of these are actually a block element. You can see all of them has closing. We have the article tag. We have the aside tag. And we have the form tag. Now, this form tag actually does some special stuff, which I'm going to be talking about later on, because we are definitely going to be looking at building a login screen in this project. So this particular form, I will talk more about it. We still have some other stuffs like, let me just be writing something inside here so that by the time I save, you see what I'm doing. We have head, we have aside, we have article, we have footer. Now, don't mind the way I'm arranging it now. I'm only just demonstrating. Okay. Then all these things by default has a block display. What I mean by block display is that they always want to take up the entire width of the line where they are. Like you can see that all this is, even if I should write all these things in the same line, they will still be broken down. Let me just show you. If I write this here by the side here and save it, it still doesn't make any difference. They are still aligned below each other, stacked upon each other. Okay, that's to show that all these things are just a block. We have the paragraph tag. Okay. And there are so many of them which I will not really go through all of them today. So these are some examples of HTML tags that we have. Okay. Just some examples of them. I won't really talk about because there are lots of them. Then we have other single tags, like we have the BR tag, which stands for break, when you want to break a text into a new line. For example, this is a paragraph. If I write another paragraph inside here, let me say this is the same paragraph. And I save this. It's still on the same line, but maybe I want to break this thing from here. And I'm wondering, how can I break it? I can simply use the break tag here. Now, the break tag does not usually have, you can see it has been broken. And if you take a look at it, it's now broken. And this from this section has actually gone under this other one. But they are still within the same paragraph. You understand? It's still within the same block. Now, if you are coding in HTML, there's something I always want you to bear in mind. Always see these things here as a block. Like, see them as just a block. What I mean, like, see them like squares. This is just a square. This is just a square. Now, I'll quickly show you something now. That's what we call is dev tools in every browser. In every browser, we have what we call dev tools. Okay, I'll come to that one after now, but just bear it in mind. We have what we call dev tools. I'll talk about it in a few seconds now. Now, we have what we call the line HR. This HR here, we just simply draw a horizontal line for us. You can see this horizontal line is drawn using HR. Now, like I said, all these are just single elements. They are not blocks. They just appear on their own like that. They just take effect on their own. But all these block elements, you must define their beginning and their end. And to define the beginning, you use this. And to define the end, you just have to append / before you type in the name of the tag. Okay, the name of the tag is defined by what you have written inside it here. All right, so I'll be looking at some other stuffs later on. And let me quickly talk about the element. I will zoom into my browser right now. Now, looking at this, every code I have written inside it that is being served on this particular browser, if I right click here, you see this particular option, inspect elements. If I on another browser, you might see it. It might not be the last option. It might be somewhere within here, but you see something called inspect elements. The shortcut is also different across different browsers. If you're using Chrome, probably you use Ctrl+Shift+I and it opens. If you're using Opera like I am doing, you use Ctrl+Shift+C. But you can simply just right click and click on this and you will inspect what you have already written. And this is actually the dev tool. Every browser has this. Now, with this dev tool, there are lots of things you can do with this dev tool. You can see that the structure of what I have written is actually right inside here. This is my HTML, which actually ends here. And within this HTML, we have the head and we have the body section. Okay. Now, if I click this head, now I know some of you might get confused about this head and the header. Let me open this body. Now, within this body, you can see that what you're looking at here is all the stuff I have written right inside my VS Code. That's what you're seeing here. So, and when I'm pointing at each of them, you're seeing them in real time. And this is what we call dev tool. You can actually inspect your elements, and you can equally take a look at probably how long it takes for your web browser to be communicated with. For example, I will try to use a live server. I will try to use something like Google to showcase this. Let me just open google.com. And I will come back. I will show you this. So now google.com has just is opening. And if I use this particular, let me open it, inspect. Okay. Now it is opened right this. It's open, and this is Google. Okay, right here you can see that all the HTML are here. All the stuff that they wrote is actually, you can see different tags are here. Now, when you take a look at this place too, you see the styles, the CSS code that they use to style this particular stuff like this. Okay, and you can equally see console. This console, you can actually write some JavaScript code within here and it will work. You can actually write some JavaScript code right here. And you have the network. Now, this network tab here, all we need to do on this network tab is where you can inspect and monitor the traffic on your website. So if I refresh this Google Chrome, let's see what happens. You can see the request is happening and the response is being returned to us. Okay, and this is what you can actually do with your dev tool. Now, when you take a look at the bottom, I hope you're following my mouse. If you take a look at the bottom here, you're going to see how many requests we have made. Now, from here, we actually made a request to google.com, right? And what kind of file is it? It's actually a document. And this particular Google document also made requests for some other files, like the scripts. These scripts are usually JavaScripts, JPEG, PNGs, which are also image files, okay? And all these requests were handled by the server, and the responses were downloaded. You can see the response status is 200, okay? And you can equally see who initiated them, how it all came in. Even the sizes of these files were also there, and the time it took for the response to be returned for each of these requests. You understand? And then in all, if you take a look at the bottom here, you see we are having 34 requests. So as a front-end developer, it's very important you understand this dev tool. It's very important to understand how to actually use this, because this can really save you tons of issues when you're doing debugging, when you're coding and you start to debug. I will still come back to this later, but I just want you to have an idea of what this inspector looks like and what you can do with it. Even here, you can equally use this inspector to find out what your site is going to look like on a mobile device by toggling the button up here. So this is actually to toggle for responsiveness, where you can then come here and choose whatever kind of device you want to emulate. Let's say, for example, you want to see what it looks like on a mobile phone, iPhone SE. This is what it will look like, okay? And stuff like that. So this is, having known this now, we can just simply move into our VS Code again and let's proceed. Most of the time, I like my class to be a bit interactive. If anybody can ask maybe a short question, so I'll just know that somebody is following along and then I'll continue. Can that be done?
All of this thing is overwhelming. Is there a way we can, how will I say it, revisit all these things you are saying, maybe a material?
Yeah, like I said, after this particular class, now we are going to also share some resources for you. Okay. Actually, I also have a channel where I do post some of these things. And I'm very sure the host of this is also recording this. So for sure, this class will still be shared later on. Okay. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, yes, it does.
Okay. So, but all in all, I just don't want you to get so overwhelmed. So let me just have a quick recap of what I have already discussed. First of all, I've already talked about how the website works, and I told you that that's what we call a request and that's what we call a response. You make a request for something, you get it, and getting it is now the response. I just demonstrated it using our dev tool, which is built in on every browser. If you are using a Chrome, if in fact everybody that is visiting the website, that is visiting the internet using a browser, you have this dev tool, and you can just, even as I'm doing this now, you can actually try it out on your browser. You will see exactly what I'm showing you now. You can try it with any website. So what this does is just, on the network tab, when you switch on the network tab, you will see how the request is being done. By the time you just, like, this is just what I just read now. By the time I just refresh it, you can see that some stuffs were actually requested for by my browser. One is this particular file, which rendered this. And then it's requesting for some of this other stuff you're seeing here is actually by the file server. So you don't even need to just bother about this. All right. Okay, so I'll just don't bother about this, but I just want you to have an idea of what it is. And subsequently, while I'm discussing in this class, I'll be making use of it to show you what you can actually do with this dev tool. Because as a front-end developer, you must use this in some cases. right? And I also show you some scenarios. There are some scenarios where this you cannot do without this dev tool, all right? Imagine a situation whereby you want to pick up a color, you want to pick up, let's say you want to see the style that was used to design a certain element on a web page. Now, this particular dev tool can assist you to just have that code snippet. And you can even make some changes to the snippet on the go and see what it looks like. Then copy it into your development environment. Okay? So that's by the way. Let me come back here. Now, I don't know if you all understand these tags here. You don't even need to memorize them. Just know that they exist and then know when to use them. Now, like I said, they don't usually have any special meaning, but as the name implies, common sense already will tell you that this is what this thing does. Like I said earlier, you don't have to get confused about this head and this header. There are two different things. The head section is talking about the head of the document, where you are going to be telling the browser information about the document. For example, when I want to request an icon, like you can look, if you take a look at this, my browser tabs here, if you're following my cursor, you will notice that here we are having this icon. We are having this icon. Let me zoom in so you can see it clearly. You are having this, like, this is my Gmail, and you're having this icon. When you come back to this Visual Studio Code, where I show you how you can download Visual Studio Code, you also notice that after it has loaded, their icon appears at the top here. Now, you have the title. Now, there are still some other requests that we are made, like the CSS, the JavaScript, all those files that we are needed in order to ensure that this particular that particular page was rendered effectively and the way we want it. All those informations are actually going to be passing through this head section. Okay. Then this body section is meant for just display the main information itself. And you display these informations using a markup, using tags like what I've just shown you here. Okay. So I'll still revisit this later on. For now, I'm going to be talking about the form and the elements. Okay. Now, we have talked so much about these particular tags. Now, what about attributes? Every tag has an attribute. A simple definition of this is this. If you take a look at this meta tag here, it has an attribute. An attribute is just a property of that particular tag. Like I said, always see a tag as an object, as a block, and as an independent element on its own. And every element has their own attributes or their own properties that you can actually use to define their behavior. You understand? Okay. Then we also have like if you take a look at this HTML tag here, you can see we have an element here. We have a property here called lang, which stands for language. And this language here actually has a value. So this is the attribute. This is the attribute which is equal to the value. All right. Now I'm going to be demonstrating this further here. For instance, I'm going to have, let's say I'm going to have a form here. This is a form, right? Now this form actually has some attributes. Now within this form, I can have so many things. But for this form to work effectively, you need to define some properties of this form. For example, you have to specify the action of this form, all right? And the action is just like, where is this form going to be submitted? When you design a form, your form is meant to be submitted somewhere. When you submit it, there will be a script, maybe a back-end script or something that is actually going to process the form. So that can be defined using this action attribute. Okay. You can equally define an ID. You can give this form an ID. Now, this ID must be unique for every element within your file. This index page now, as you can see, we are working on index.html. Let me assume I give this form an ID of, let's say, login form. Right? Let's say I give it an ID of login form like this. If I have another form again, let's say I have another form right here For instance, I have another form here. Okay. These are two different forms now. These two forms cannot have the same ID. Okay. They cannot have the same ID. In fact, if they have the same ID, there's going to be a little error, and I'll show you what I mean. But I like you to see the practical part of it. So now, both of them are having login form. Now, if you're looking at it in your source code, it won't show you any error because, like I said, HTML is not a programming language. It's just a markup. Whatever you write there. But when you come to your browser now, you notice that if I try to right-click and inspect this page again, if I inspect the page and I come down to console, if I come down to console, let me refresh again. Now, maybe in some browser, if you are using your Chrome browser, most of the time you're going to see an error here telling you that you are having multiple ID of an element. So, but what I'm trying to say in all is this. Normally, when you are working with your HTML and you are giving an ID to an element, make sure that two elements don't have the same ID. Okay. Now, an ID is just a unique identifier. I can actually call this one maybe a registration form. I cannot be having two login forms on a page. I can call this registration form. Now, these are two different forms, okay, on this page. You are not going to see it here because there's nothing inside. By default, form does not show anything until you have placed its elements inside it, okay? Now, I want to further show you that we can actually do some stuff right here. Let me quickly get started with this. I'm going to open a section here, okay? Now, this is just a section, and I can just define a class. Now, a class is used for your CSS. There's a way you kind of interact within your HTML and your CSS. So you can use this class to reference this particular element within your CSS or within your JavaScript. Like I said, this element, this section here now, this particular tag you're seeing here is an element on its own. Okay? So let's say I call this login section, or let's say I call it form section. Form section. Okay, it's going to bear all my forms, right? Right inside here, just for you to see what I'm doing, I'll just put in any gibberish text inside here and save it. It's there without form, there's nothing inside here. Now, I can write certain stuff. I can give other things like ID. I can give it an ID. If I want to uniquely identify this, I can give it the same ID as form section. Okay, this is very okay. Now, a particular element in HTML can have multiple class names. For example, if I have this form section, I can actually give it another class name if I want to. You understand that? You are going to be seeing that later on while I'm building this. Now, let me quickly talk about the CSS because both of them usually work hand in hand. When you're working on HTML will only give you the markup. So I'm going to create a markup right now, and then I'll talk about the CSS. So I just created a section here, and inside this section, I want to have a division like this. Now I want to divide this into two. Okay, I want to divide this into two, and I'm going to call this container. Okay, so I'll give it a class name of container. It's going to contain my two forms, right? So I'll close it. Now within this particular div here, I want to have two sections. Okay. I don't know. Let me open up something. So I will just show you what I want to do. I want you to have an idea of what I am doing here. Let me see. Where is my... this, so I can use this thing to just draw and show you what I'm talking about. Sorry, I just want to use this to draw
Yeah, hi
so that
Michael.
you can understand.
Yeah, so we have like 5 minutes to go.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Wow, I thought this class is meant to last up till 9 p.m. I thought, wow.
No, like 1 hour, cause
I was actually looking at 2 hours. Honestly, that's why I was going so in depth.
yeah, cause I know most of them here are kind of new, and most of our classes are 1 hour plus, probably like 10 minutes added. So, and
Oh,
like
really?
the other person
Wow.
said, it's overwhelming. So it would be for them to probably go back and watch again and have more resources. So maybe for the CSS, maybe I'll probably just send them. Maybe you can drop the resources for them to go through.
Okay, okay. Wow. Okay, fine. So this is just what I want to do right now. Look at this white space here as to be my look at this white space here to be my website. So I want to just have something like this. Oh. I want ah, I don't even understand. I've not used this 3D editor before. I'm able to let me just well, I believe since we don't have time, let me not waste your time. Let me just go straight to the point here. So we are going to have this thing like this, and I'm going to have two more divisions, one for login, one for registration. Okay, so but for now, I'm going to be working on the login just for now. So I'm going to have a div like this, two divs inside. And this particular one here, I'm going to give it a class of, let's say, login. It's a login div. And this is going to be the class of, let's say, registration div. So I want to have my login and my registration side by side, okay? Okay, so I'm spacing it out just for readability's sake, so you can be able to be looking at them so you don't get confused. And quickly, I'm going to just start putting up my stuff inside my login here. So within this my login division here, okay, if I save this file now, nothing is here. So within this space, I want to just open up a form. And I'm not going to specify anything within it, but a form has different elements, and these elements are the input. We have the input element, and the input, we have different types of input elements, and you'll be seeing some of them. Like, for example, now I have input text. Okay. Now, this input text like this is how it is written. Let me explain. Input type text. So this is just the attribute of this particular element. And input is on its own also is just a single kind of element. It's not a block element. So it doesn't have a close. If you must close it, you can just close it in front of this place like this. Okay? This is how you write stuff like this. So it's not going to have a closing tag. So we have an attribute which is called type, and we have specified it to be text. And this type attribute actually defines the type of input we want. Now, this name is what we are going to use to programmatically know what this form is. Like when we submit this form to a server, the server will see the input, the value of this particular text using this name. And then we have an ID. If you want, just like I've already explained, you can give it a unique ID. So for instance, I can give this a name and we can call this maybe username. So username is usually just an input. If I save it, you are going to see this here. The text is out. I can actually type something inside it. That's an input. So it's used to collect information. And then I can have another input here of password. Okay. Input type password. Now, this password on its own also comes out. Now you can see the way it appeared by the side here. And when I'm typing inside by default, it is hidden. That's because it is password. All right. So depending on the type you define within this, you can see what I was talking about, the attribute of an element. Depending on the value you pass into the type, that will determine the action, the behavior of that particular tag. So I'm going to finally put in a button. Okay, and this button, I can just say login button. And the button also have to define the type of button it is going to be, which we have different types of button. We have button, we have menu, we have reset, we have submit. So in this my case, I'm just going to use button here for now. Or okay, let me just make it submit so that we can see some things I want to show you in real time. Okay, so we have the login button here that is clickable. And when I click on it, this form gets submitted. Okay. Now, there are some other things I also need to pass into this particular stuff, inside this particular element, like the placeholder, so that somebody can actually know. We have a label. I can actually use label to do this. Like, let's say I can have label, and this label can be username, so that users can know what you want them to do. So if I put username here, let's say label for username. Let me also give an ID here, username. Okay, and I save this. You can see we have username appearing there. So I'm going to also duplicate this and put it for this particular person. And I'll call this password, for password. All right. And the name of this is also password. So I'll just say password. And don't mind the way it is. That is because I have not styled it. So with our CSS, we can actually style these things to look better. Now, I would like to group these things together since these are actually the input. So this is just like a label for this input. I would like to group them together. So how do I group it? I can actually use a div also to group it. Okay, so I can have a div, just put a div like this and put these two together. Then also have a div and put these two together inside. Now, by the time I save this, you notice that it has broken themselves down. Now, why did they break themselves down? That's simply because this this div, like I said, is a block element that takes up the entire space. So it's automatically, this particular div, because of the intrusion of this div, it has taken the space of all this width here. Likewise this, but within this div, we have these two things, which are inline. That's why you're seeing them appearing on the same line like this. So these are inline elements, or you can call them single kind of elements. And here we have these ones to be block elements. And then we have the submit button. Okay, now I'm going to quickly just style this. Now, if I should also introduce this same thing into our registration, I can have something where I can just do like, let's say, I'll open up a form again. And inside this form here, I'm going to define elements inside it. And this particular div here, I want to just have like a label. Maybe I don't want to use label this time around. I want to just use only the input. So I have input text, okay? And this is going to be username. And I'm going to also put an extra stuff here called placeholder. Now this placeholder attribute is actually going to display a message. I can just be like, enter your username, okay? And I'll have another input here. I have another input of, let me just do this way. Email. So input type email, and I can just call this email, ID email, ID username. Now, like I said, within the same page, you cannot have the same ID, it is not ideal, it's not recommended. So the best thing, instead of, since I already have username here, I can just add something here, something like reg underscore username. Okay. And then here I can pass in placeholder, enter your email. Then probably I'm going to also have a password. So input, maybe password. Okay. And I'll specify the ID to be registration password. And placeholder, enter your password. I just deliberately want to do this thing like this so that you all will understand different ways you can actually display your stuffs. Now, if you take a look at this, the very first one I have here is I didn't put a placeholder. That's why it's empty. There's nothing inside it, right? So for me to make it understandable for users to know what this input here is requiring, I have to use a label to define that. But here, I don't want to use labels, so I just have to use a placeholder to type in a text. Now, these placeholders usually will be replaced the moment you start typing. So like this, enter your username. The moment I begin to type inside here, for example, if I type Michael, you can see that it's being replaced automatically. And if it is empty, it comes back. And that is just the work of this placeholder. Okay, so I will quickly try to style this. But one more thing is left here. I'll have to also put a button to submit this. So I'll just put in, I can actually use an input also for this. So I can use input button. Okay, so input type, I can just say submit. And then I'll use a value. Now, take a look at the difference between this button and this particular input. Now, this particular one, I'm using value now to specify something here. And the value I'm going to give to this is register. Okay. Now, if I save this, you can see how it appeared. They look exactly the same, but they are actually different stuff. But they will still do the same work because both of them are going to be submitting a form. So you can actually decide to display this way, or you can display it this other way. You understand that now? Then the next thing again that we are going to be looking at now is the styling. So I'll quickly just write a simple CSS code because of our time. I won't be going too in depth. Now, I haven't created it, but you can actually write your CSS within this page. There are different ways you can write CSS. For example, I'll give you an instance. This my body section. If I want to change the background color, I can just write style within here. So within this style attribute, I can put something like background, and then the background, I can say something like background color, and then I can specify the color red. And by the time I save this, everywhere turns red immediately. And that is what the style does. Now, this is actually a CSS code I've written inside here. And this kind of styling is what we call the inline styling. Okay? We call this inline styling. And what is this actually called? This is a declaration. We call it CSS declaration. It's just a style rule, but a pair of rules defining the attribute and the value. So the attribute here is actually the background color. Okay, so this is an attribute. Every element you see within here, all of them has this background color attribute, and you can actually set this property to anything you want. Okay, for example, now this particular one, I can come to this place and style this, and I can do something like background. Let's say background color to be blue, and I can come to this other. I can come to this other division here, this particular one here, and I can put style, and I'll make the background color to be, let's say, yellow. By the time I save this, you are seeing that this one here is blue, this one is yellow. So that is for this, but I will not be writing it like this. There are some places where this kind of styling is effective, but for now, I won't be using it. So you can actually still decide to write the same thing using the inline styling method, where you can come within the same document here you just open style tag here, okay, and you close it. So once you open it, anything you're writing inside here is going to be a style rule, a CSS code, okay, that is going to do a lot of things. Now, for example, this body, if I want to specify the same background color I have already done before, I can just simply come to this place and I'll just say body. Now, this body here is now a selector, okay? So here now, if you're not using this inline, there are other types of CSS, which is the internal. This is internal kind of CSS, and we also have the external, which I'll be using, obviously. So this particular one now is a selector, and when we open a selector, you use a curly bracket like this, and then you can specify the background as the property background color. Even if you're using VS Code, when you start typing, VS Code will be suggesting to you every other properties that you might want to know. So if I specify the color, let me say I want to use this brown color here, and I save this, I'm going to see that automatically everything changes to brown. So it still works out. If I don't want to write it this way, I can just come inside the body, open a style here, and just write the declaration inside. But if I'm using the internal, then what I'm going to do is simple. Open the style tag, and then use a selector. The selector can be anything. Selector can be the tag selector, like this is a tag selector. This particular one matches up with this body. Okay, it matches up with this body, and that's why it is this color. Now, if I should specify div and give one other color, you'll notice that all these divs here, for example, if I do something like div, I do div and I specify the color to be brown, or let me just put border instead, and I'll specify border, and I'll give it 1 pixel solid brown. Then you see that all the divisions here, you can see all of them are just within their own frame. Fine and good. Let me quickly just now show you how you can use the external CSS, and that is what I will be using. Like I told you, most of these things we'll be writing them within the head section. So within the head section, I want my brother to know that there are another file I wanted to bring in, and that file is going to be a CSS file. So I'm going to write it this way: link relatively style sheet. So with this relation, this relationship here tells us what kind of file are we linking to. So when you specify style sheets, you're telling it that you are linking up to style sheets. This thing can be any other thing like icon, if you want to link up your 5 icon here, or so many other things. Okay, so, and then I want to link it to this file called style.css, but we have not yet created this style. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just create a new file here. So within this place, I can just right click and say new file, and I'll just say style.css. Now, this style.css is created. Now, you can see that CSS is uploaded. Even if the browser is even notifying you that I just uploaded the CSS now. So now, if I write that same thing I wrote before within this place, body, now I don't need to open the style tag again because already I'm working within the style. So if I just say body background color and I say red and I save this file, automatically it's affecting it. So I'm going to be working from this place right now. This actually is the nicest way to work with your HTML and with your CSS. Putting them on separate files so you don't have to crowd everywhere with code. Okay, so let me just go ahead and start styling this thing. Now I'm going to split this particular thing to the left so I can be looking at my two stuffs, right? So now it's splitted. Okay. So right now it's splitted. And if you're looking at, split to the right. Yeah, I prefer this one. So I can close this. So I can be looking at my HTML code and I'll also be looking at my CSS and I'll be working. So first of all, what I want to do here is I want to use this selector called all, and what this thing does is every element in this my web browser, in this particular page that is requesting this tab, I want to unset whatever that is there. If you notice here, there are some padding or there's some spacing around there. So what I want to do first of all here is I want to remove them. So I can just say margin and I'll just say 0, padding 0. so that I can have full control of whatever thing that I am going to be writing within this place. Okay, then I can set up my box sizing to be border box, and I'll save this. You can see that everything is now at the edge of this particular stuff. So the next thing I'm going to do is specify another rule. Now, if you take a look at this is one CSS rule. Okay, this is one CSS rule that selected every element, removing all their margin, their padding, and this. So I'm going to quickly work on this other one. So the next thing I want to work on here now is actually this section. This is my form section. So I'm going to select my body first of all. And then within the body, I want to just change the background to, let's say, light gray. Now, this background is actually a shortcut to many things. You can use this background to even use background image. So I want to just do something like light gray, okay? And that's going to change the color of my file. Now, take a look. I want you to understand something, how this declaration is being done. By the time you type in a property, you use a colon to separate, instead of using equal to like we do within the tag. Here we are going to be using colon instead. So background, colon, then the value of the color. It can be any color at all right? And then to end your declaration, you are going to use semicolon. This semicolon is just like when you're writing a sentence, and a sentence is not complete if you did not put full stop. So I just wrote a sentence here, which is actually a rule, and I've ended the sentence here using semicolon. All right. Now, because it is within this curly bracket and selecting, this is actually the selector, we call this thing a style rule. Okay. And this is a declaration. So this is just what I want to do within this place. And then I'm going to come into this my section here. So within this section, I already called it form section. So I can actually do something like this, section dot form hyphen section. Now, why am I introducing this dot? I could have still removed this and just say dot form section. It will still work. Now, this dot is telling the CSS that what we are looking, you should go and look for any element within this HTML file who has a class of form section. Okay, so it is going to go and look for anything at all that has form section. Obviously, we have form section here. And then I'm going to give it the following styles where I will just say padding. I'll pad it to, let's say, okay, let me just say I want to pad it like 30 pixels round, 30 pixels all round, okay? And then I want to specify its height. I want to specify its height now. So I will say height. I want the height to just be like, let's say 50% of my, or let's say 100% of my screen. So I'll just do something like this. I'll say 100 VH. Instead of pixels, I can just say VH, which means view height. And when I save this, you'll notice that something really happened. I've added some spacing around here. Okay. Now, within this particular form section, if you notice, inside it, we have something like this container. And this container is actually holding every other thing inside here. Now, I want to center this. I want everything to be on the center. So I can center it using this. So I can just come to this place and I'll say form section. Now, this form section is looking at this form section. Now, inside this form section, I'll give a space. Inside it, I have another section called container. So I'll say container. Okay. So this particular one here, I'm going to specify something right inside it. And what am I going to specify right now? I want it to be centered. And how do I center it? By simply saying margin. Now, when you are saying margin, we have something we call margin top. We have margin top, we have margin bottom, we have margin left, margin right, and all of that. Okay? But by simply saying margin, I can specify the option for the top, okay, the top, the right, the bottom, and the left. Okay, this is how it goes. Okay, so but these things are going to be numeric values, measurements. So, but I can simply just specify the top and the right like this. So I'll simply say 0. I can just say auto. 0 pixels. So the thing should move, but I don't know. It's okay. Let me see. It should move. But if that doesn't work for you, there's another way you can do that by simply specifying a flex display here. So I can just come here and I'll say display flex, and then I'll simply say flex. Okay, I'll just say flex justify content. Sorry, justify content, and I'll say center, align items, and I also say center. So this is obviously going to center everything within this space. So for now, I'm going to remove this. If I should maximize this, you'll notice that I have everything just at the center of my design. So that is just what that thing does for us now. Now I'm going to take a look at styling these ones by themselves now. So I'm coming to the container itself now. So I have the container. Now this container is having two sections, which is the login div and the registration div. And I can equally specify a flex box here. I would have started to explain what flex is now, but we don't have any time again. So just follow along. So I'll just change the display of this one here also to flex. And when I change it to flex, I want to arrange this particular two, like I want to arrange this section, this one and this one. I want them to be side by side. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll just put this flex like this, and that's it. By the time I save it, you notice that this is now on its own. For you to understand what I mean, I'm going to give two different background colors to this one. So I'll select this login div now. So I'm going to select login div. I'll say dot login div. And I want to just give it a border. A border, let's say 1 pixels. 1 pixels border, solid border. And the color is, let's say, blue. Okay. And you can see that, right? Then I'm going to also specify margin. I'm also going to specify padding and margin. So within this box now, I want to have something like a background color. And the color I want to give it now is not something pure white, just light white like this, background. And then I want to specify also the padding. The padding is just the internal space, okay? The internal space within this box. So padding here, I'm going to say, let me just give padding of like 10 pixels. By the time I save it, you can see how it looks like, okay? And probably give it some margin. Give it some margin. So I'll say margin right. Margin right. I want to give it like 5, let's say 10 pixels margin on the right, so that this one spaces out also. Okay. Now, instead of me doing all these things, there's something I can equally do to make sure that all these things are placed the way they're supposed to be, and that can be handled within this place. So within this my container here, that I can say justify content, or I can say justify. Let me first use align items. So when I say align items, and I want to say space between, space between. Okay. Now that is supposed to give me some spacing around. Okay, like I don't know. Let me try to. It's supposed to give me some spacing within this place. Now this one here is still arranged like this because I have not broken them down, and I'll still come to that. That is what CSS can do. Without the CSS, you don't have life to your design. Okay, so CSS is just like painting. So the next thing I want to work on now is this inputs. So I want to select all the inputs. Before that, let me work on the registration div. Okay, and I also give it. Okay, fine. I can actually give this registration div exactly the same style here by just taking it away and coming to this place, putting comma, give a space, and I'll just assign it there. So let me remove this. So if it automatically take up the same styling as this, I just gave the same styling rule to login div and registration div. So by the time I save this, you can see that both of them are now having exactly the same kind of design right now. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to give them radius, border radius. So just to cover it a bit, border radius, let's say 10 or let's say 20 pixels radius. And that is going to actually curve this. That's too much. Let me make it 10. And that gives it rounded border. Right? Then the next thing I want to do is for these divs here, I'm going to do something. Within this login, I have login div. And within this login div, I have, I'm supposed to give these things class. So let me just give this a class name. Let me do it together. This and this. So I'm going to give them a class name of, let me say, input group. Okay, like that. And so I'll just come to this place. I'll just simply say input group. Input group. Now, this input group, what I want to do is I want to set margin around them. So I'm going to have margin bottom to be, let's say, 5 pixels. By the time I save this, you'll notice that there is now spacing around. Let me make it up to 10. Okay. All right, so I think that looks more appealing right now. I'm using this a rush because of the time limit. I'm very sure I've already exceeded the time limit. Okay, so then I'm going to style this particular text box here. I'm going to specify this particular text box. So what I'm going to do is this. I've not even talked about the responsiveness of this, but I think that will be later on. I don't think I can be able to cover that again now in this class. Let me just style the input box. So have the input, we have the input here. So all my inputs, I want them to look the same. Now I'm not going to use dot. I'll just simply type input. So when I say input, I want every input here to look, to have a rounded border. So I'll say border radius, border hyphen radius. And I'm going to give it a radius of 5 pixels and a padding of, let's say, 5 pixels. And I'm also going to, that border there, I want to change it. So I can do something like outline. And I want the outline to be, let's say, red. Okay, fine, just a border color. And I want the border color to be blue. Okay. And when I save this, this is what it looks like. Okay. But I don't really like that border. Like, I don't really like this blue. So I can actually change this blue by using this if you are using VS Code, this is one of the benefits you have. So you can actually use the RGB code and have that view like this. Okay. Now I have my text box like this that I can actually use to type. And then I will start my button. So I'm going to style the button. So all of my button and all of my inputs with type of submit. I want them to have the same shape. And the shape I want them to have, so I'm going to give padding of, for the top and bottom, I want the top and bottom to be 5 pixels. And I want their left and right to be 10 pixels. And when I save this, nothing happens. Let me see. I think there's an error somewhere. So let me take a look at this first of all and see where the problem is coming from. Okay, I think this is my error. I didn't actually put a comma here. So it was looking for this particular selector within the button, but it's not there. So I'm going to use comma to tell you that it is two different elements. So by the time I save it now, you can see that it now works for both this and this, right? Okay. So the next thing I want to do now is, probably change the color and probably remove the border. So I'll say border, no, I don't want them to have any border. Okay? Don't want to have any border, but I want them to have background color. So I can say background color of, let's say, something red. And let me say something blue, probably light blue. Okay. And then a text color of,
Hi, Michael. We're having 1 minute to go.
Okay, so if you take a look at this, we have just done a simple two different forms: the login and the registration of this particular section. Here, I'm going to just use H1 here to specify login form, and then this other place, I'm going to use H1 also to specify registration form. Okay. And this is just what we have been able to do today. But I didn't work on this particular one again, and time did not permit me. I would have also fixed this one up. So, but this is just a basic introduction to show you what you can actually do with this. So I can actually type in my username right inside here and type in my password right inside here. And I can also type in my email here. Now, if I try to submit this particular thing, okay, this is where they try to put in my email, and I try to submit it. If you tell me, please include an @ so that email type also is like a validator to tell you that you must specify an email inside here. It happens out of the box, so you don't even need to worry yourself about that. So this is just a basic introduction, and I believe at least you must have grabbed one or two things. After now, I will be sharing the resources, and even this particular form, if you need it, I'll be pushing it up to a Git repository. So it's going to be part of Mr. Wisdom. I believe you already have a channel through which you communicate to them. So I'll be sending you the links to the resources. You'll be sharing it with them after this class.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you so much. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining this call, and thank you, Mr. Michael, for taking your time to take us through from the very basics of HTML and part of CSS. I know we wanted more time, but I know how it is. Saturdays are probably for people to relax, and I know it's stressful for some of us here that are new to HTML. So that's why I wanted it to be a little bit short. So with the resources you share, it will really go a long way for them to come back and watch this video, go back and also go through the resources, and also go through this example you also did today. So tomorrow, same time again, and this tomorrow we're going to learn the basics of JavaScript. So it will be like a continuation of what we learned today. So he will probably use a little bit of features in JavaScript to add some actions to this static login and registration form that we have here. All right, thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Michael, so much for your time, and thank you for joining us today. Good night.
All right.
Bye, guys.